Hi, I'm Anna Hoffman, and welcome to this episode of Data Exposed Live. This is very exciting because we are streaming live from Microsoft campus in Redmond, Washington. I'm so excited to have you all joining us today. If you are joining from LinkedIn, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, somewhere else, we just ask that you come and ask your questions at this URL that you see up now, aka.ms/dataexposedlive. Now, we are going to be using this primarily to look at the questions and everything like that. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them there and we will respond accordingly. Since this is our monthly news update, we're going to be covering all the latest news. We have some really great guests that are also here with me in the studios. Going to see some great demos, great content, great announcements. A little bit different flow than we have in the past, but I think y'all are really going to like it. So let's get into it, but before we do, I wanted to start with a brief history. So right now we're in Channel 9 Studios, maybe probably has a new name, but we're gonna go with Channel 9 Studios for now. What you're seeing is a picture from years ago when I used to work on a lot of AI products. So this was my first time in the studios. It was really fun, and then, you know, fast forward a couple years, started working on the SQL team, and we started recording in the studio, but a different studio, and, you know, we were just starting Data Exposed, just kind of figuring out what is this going to be now that we're bringing it back. And then we got upgraded and we got to do some cool in-person interviews with people like Mark Rosinovich. And finally, we got upgraded to this studio that we're in today. Then unfortunately, the pandemic happened and we haven't done anything on person, but we've been able to connect with you all from the comfort of all of our homes. But it's really exciting to have people in person. Of course, we're still streaming remote to you, but we're hoping it gives a little bit better experience. We'll see how it goes. Let us know what you think in the comments or where you're streaming in from. So today, a little bit different flow than what we usually do on the live news updates because we just have so many awesome guests that I wanted to bring in. We're going to go product by product through some updates, some demos, and all sorts of great stuff. And so to kick us off, I thought, you know, we should start with SQL Server. A couple things that have happened in the SQL Server space in the past month or so. A big one was the end of support for SQL Server 2012. There's a lot of options, and I pointed again this month to a blog in our blog for the news update where you can learn kind of what your options are if you're one of those folks sitting on SQL Server 2012. Now there was another exciting announcement around CTP 2.1, but instead of covering it myself, I thought who better to bring up than Bob Ward himself. So let me welcome Bob. Bob, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Anna, can you believe this? We're here in the studios at Microsoft doing this versus our homes together. It's a very honored to be here on Data Exposed again. It's great, and I can't believe you're here in the studios finally.
I know, it's really fun to be sitting next to you instead of you in Texas and me somewhere else.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, we're excited to have you on the show, and I just wanted to kick off by, can you just give us an update on what's happening with SQL Server 2022?
Yeah, as you mentioned, we just released Community Technology Preview 2.1. Sounds very official, right? It's just the latest Community Technology Preview we have. Customers can download and see. We've got a couple of minor new features in there, things like Delta table format support for virtualization, data virtualization, approximate query processing, a few other type of things, query store on by default. So it's just a way of us iterating on the public preview that customers can download. And we're kind of now down on that train to try to release this product. Kind of landing that plane now a little bit,
You got a date for us?
You know, you always do this in the show. You always try to sneak in something that I'll reveal a secret about Microsoft.
Got to give them the exclusive.
But Anna, I'll give you my answer I always do. It says SQL Server 2022, so we will release it in this calendar year. I probably won't have a job. But yeah,
Okay, well,
by the end of this year, we will release the product.
All right, we'll hold you to that.
Okay,
It's been recorded,
yeah,
it's live.
of course, yeah.
You know, we've been hearing a lot about it. I'd love to see, you know, some of your highlights in action if you have something you could share with us.
Yeah, you know, I've been kind of thinking about the cloud connectivity part of SQL Server 2022, because we have so many great features in this new product. But one of them is Synapse Link. And I think about all the different products in Azure Data. I think about Intelligent Data Platform, Rohan's talked about a little bit. So I thought, can I find a way to tie in SQL Server, Synapse, Purview, and Power BI all at one time? And turns out I can. So you want to see it?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, let's do it. Let's go. Okay, so it's all going to start out with Synapse. I need a Synapse workspace. So I've built one here, and I've built something called a dedicated pool, a SQL pool, where I'm going to store my data from SQL Server. Now, there's always a dedicated endpoint. People didn't really know that. You can use Management Studio even to connect to Synapse to go run queries. But I want to start out with this Synapse workspace. Now I want to get SQL Server 2022 installed, and I'm going to restore the Wide World Importers sample database. I always like to use that for examples. Easy to download for folks. So I'll restore that on 2022 on one of our previews here. And you can see all the different tables you would normally see in this database, but I added a couple of tables. I added a vehicles table and a vehicle stock items table, kind of like keeping cargo information associated with your vehicle. And over here in Management Studio, I've decided to populate and seed some data, just some basic data for each vehicle, which is in a city, one particular cargo item. So what I'd like to do is synchronize this with Synapse. So first what you do in Synapse is you build what's called a link service. Two of them, actually. One of them specifically to say, what is the connection string to get to SQL Server? The second is something called a landing zone. This is like a temporary Azure storage space where SQL Server is going to put files out there that are easily ingested into Synapse. So I've got these built, and now I'm in Synapse Studio, right? People who use Synapse are used to this. But I want to go discover my SQL Server data. So guess what? I've integrated Purview Search with Synapse. So I've scanned my SQL Server, and I can tell I've got a certified database. My organization is certified for me to use this. I even can tell who the contacts are. I can see that I'm the owner of the database, but people like Buck Woody are experts for me to ask questions about. This is metadata that Purview has scanned. So here's schemas that I have, different schemas. So I'm going to go look at the sales schema in specific, and I want to go maybe poke on the customers table. Like, what does it look like? Like, what are some of the columns in there, and what are the properties? And this is what is so cool about Purview and using the search capability. I can see classifications that are part of the table itself, but then I can kind of drill into the columns and find out, okay, well, there's those classifications. Which column goes with which classification? Kind of help me make some decisions on, do I want to pull this data in? Is it going to meet company policies? Those kind of type things. And I can see a contact. Oh, look, you're the contact. You're the owner of this table. So I can ask you questions about this table as I'm thinking about bringing it into Synapse. Now, I want to do the vehicles table, but I don't know what schema it's in. So I'm going to go back to that Purview search and search for vehicles. Turns out it knows tables. So I can go click vehicles. I can drill into this one now and decide, okay, what are the classifications for this one? What do I care about? Are there things that may be part of my company's policies I should be worried about? And again, I can even drill in to specific columns, look at classifications for there, because I'm deciding what to do. And look, Assad Khan is the owner of this table, so I can ping Assad, our boss, and say, hey, Assad, what is going on with this table? So I love that Purview search capability fused into Synapse. Now what I've done is I've used Synapse Studio to connect to the SQL Server, and I'm going to go ahead and pick all the tables in the Wide World Importers database based on this investigation I did. And here's the target tables automatically being fed into Synapse pools. So this is kind of what we call like the link connection. How do I tie this together? And I've got my SQL Server, I've picked my dedicated pool, and over here in the GUI, I've even picked my landing zone. Again, that being a temporary Azure storage space where we're going to put things like Parquet files that Synapse understands how to ingest into Synapse pools from SQL Server, all built into SQL Server. So I've already started this process. It's very seamless because I installed what's called the self-hosted runtime on my SQL Server itself, and it's communicating with SQL Server to tell it how to seed data. This replicating status shows that all my data is getting seeded from SQL Server automatically into these SQL pools. So what I'd like to do is go in and run maybe, I don't know, like a query or something. But first I'll discover and I can see all the different SQL dedicated pool tables that mirror what's in my SQL Server. But there's rich query capabilities. So I built a query to get like cargo counts by cities. Remember the data we ingested into SQL Server? Let's go see it in Synapse because I've replicated in Synapse. Let's go run it. Oh, and it turns out the cities, Anna, are in Texas. I'm from Texas, so I get to pick the names of the cities, and you can see various cities where these cargoes live, where the cargo counts live. And guess what? I know Patrick LeBlanc, but it was pretty easy for me to build a Power BI report. Just pick those tables, and it shows the various cities in Texas. The circles kind of represent the cargo count. So as you're going to see later, when we add data, those circles may change. And in fact, I'm going to go back into SQL Server, and I'm going to randomly populate a certain number of cargo counts across these various vehicles. And again, SQL Server is going to automatically look at these changes from the transaction log and in near real time feed them into Synapse. So I expect to very quickly rerun this query in Synapse and see the changes. Sure enough, I can. You can see now these cities have different types of cargo counts. Here's Bob's 1990 visualization. You got charts right here you're seeing, which is kind of cool to see right into Synapse Studio. But I would rather Power BI reflect this, right? So turns out Power BI automatically can refresh and see now, and you see those larger circles reflect the different cargo counts based on the city in Texas where those existed. So pretty slick, right? I can go in and see this information. I can synchronize SQL Server with Synapse together. I can use Synapse to go query the data because it's already synchronized in there automatically. Not a lot of work to make that happen. And then, of course, I can get Purview search to work to go discover my data if I'd like to. I love that capability. It's integrated to Synapse, and Power BI automatically just looks at my data. So think about what I just built together, Anna. SQL Server, Synapse, Purview, Power BI, all in one situation.
Yeah, Bob, this is pretty crazy. Like, you've shown a lot of things. One question I have as we kind of like think back to what we just saw is like SQL Server 2022 is running anywhere, right? And all this stuff is in Azure.
SQL Server 2020 could be in your data center, it could be an Azure virtual machine, it could be wherever you want it to be. But because we've built in this tight integration with Synapse, you can link to Synapse and see your data near real time. And of course, Power BI and Purview are integrated already. Why not use all those technologies together?
Wow, that's pretty exciting. I think maybe you came up with this. You said SQL Server 2022 is cloud connected.
Absolutely.
Like, wow, it can see that. You're in the Azure portal showing off SQL Server 2022.
Yeah, I started the whole journey in Azure actually to connect to SQL Server. That was kind of cool, right?
Yeah, so, very cool. Well, Bob, just a final kind of call to action. What should people be doing right now with SQL Server 2022?
I'd love to see people just download it, right? Download the bits. There's an evaluation edition that you can download. There's even Linux. There's containers. You can use all of those things and give it a spin. If you go to, and I'm pretty sure we'll put this on the screen, aka.ms SQL Server 22 demos, I've got a demo for every new feature out there that people can just try themselves. Try out anything with the engine, with cloud connectivity, anything you want to do. So go out and try the technology and start giving us feedback.
Awesome, cool. Well, Bob, thanks so much for coming on Data Exposed Live in the studios. It's great to have you on the show.
It was great to be here. Thanks, Anna.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So great to have Bob on the show. Always cool to see some of the things that he's going to show. And, we're going to move right along. So remember, we've got the whole SQL Server, Azure SQL, and more to cover today on our show. And we're going to move right along into Azure SQL Database. So what you can see here is a lot of updates that have been landing in Azure SQL Database over the past several months. So you have things like SQL Ledger, which became generally available, bringing blockchain to Azure SQL Database, things like JSON enhancements, local developer experience, so many things that are happening in the developer space for Azure SQL Database. And I'm not a true developer, I'm more of a faker, so I thought I'd bring on a couple of my developer friends to tell us more about what's going on. So I want to welcome Drew to come on Data Exposed. Drew, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Anna. I really appreciate you arranging for this desk so we can still wear like a fuzzy slippers and stuff, even though we're here in the office.
Yeah, I've got flannel pajamas on underneath,
Gotta keep things comfortable.
It's great to have you on the show in person. We've done a lot and seen you do a lot of different things in the developer space. Now, I know you're going to show us stuff with Codespaces. I didn't even know Codespaces and Azure SQL were things that went together, so tell us.
So Bob was just talking about how with SQL Server 22 and with all of the Azure SQL options, it's kind of SQL anywhere. And when we talk about developing with SQL, Codespaces and SQL and containers means that you can do SQL development anywhere. And Codespaces takes that to a whole new level where either in the browser or from VS Code connected to a code space, you can do development in a totally new environment. And it kind of removes any excuse to not try out the new things in SQL 22 and Azure SQL Database.
Love it. Do you have can you take a
Yeah.
look?
So I want to walk folks through real quick a look at the Azure SQL Database local developer experience in Codespaces. As a developer, creating a new repository is a pretty common thing. Like, I just want to start a new sample, try some things out, so I'm just going to create a little place to put that code. This is where Codespaces' strengths come in, is I don't want to need to install new stuff on my computer. I can just create that new code space, and it's going to use a default image that includes Docker and .NET and a whole bunch of common tools that I might need as a developer, but it's not going to change the things on my local machine. It's launched right in the browser. I could connect to it from VS Code, but we're going to stay in the browser in the sake of time for today. I mentioned that it's got .NET already installed, so I just want to check real quick using the built-in terminal. What are my .NET SDKs that are available? When you develop with SQL Server, there's SQL projects, which is a .NET tool that means that you can build a schema offline using those SQL projects and compile and build it. I just need to let the SQL projects extension for VS Code know where it can find my .NET SDKs. And since we're in Codespaces, it's going to be at that home/codespaces/.net. This is the setup. This is it for using SQL development in Codespaces. It's just letting it know where the .NET SDK is. As long as you have the MS SQL extension, and then it'll come with the SQL projects extension, you're pretty much ready to go. So I'm going to create a new Azure Functions project. You could be making a .NET Console app. You could be building a website. Whatever you're developing, SQL is going to be there for you. We can even just use JavaScript here. It doesn't need to be .NET all the time. And then with this project, I'm basically going to set myself up to start writing some APIs in Node.js. So we'll just say, hey, it's going to be something that's an HTTP trigger, and my project is ready and away. This is kind of, I'm a developer setting up my project, but I need a database to go behind this Azure function. And so I don't have anything like up my sleeve. I haven't cheated here. Like, the connections pane is going to load, and you're going to see I don't have anything new connected. Like, I'm not cheating folks here. There's nothing up my sleeve. But what I am going to do is I'm going to start a new database project. You can do this for SQL Server. You can do this for Azure SQL Database. But the great thing about SQL projects is not only that you can kind of develop that schema offline, but you're also then bringing your schema into source control. So your database has the state of all the data in it, but as you develop new features for your application, then your schema state is going to be in source control. So I've started creating files for my database. So in this database project, we have these kind of common constructs around build and publish. I'm just going to organize these files real quick in a tables folder, because I just don't want things to get too messy. If you're going to keep things in source control, take care of them, and make a customer table. I'm not going to get too creative with this table, just a first name, last name type scenario, so you can kind of see how that comes together. And just to validate the schema real quick, I will do that build operation. So we've started to build out a schema, but we haven't connected to SQL Server. We haven't created an Azure SQL Database instance, no overhead yet. And really, in reality, I want to keep developing locally here in this code space. I don't want to try to do anything beyond that. So if I just build my SQL project real quick, you can see that I did it from the command line. You can use the UI option, but I did it from the command line, because the great thing about SQL projects is that not only for local development, but then also for CI/CD, when you're ready to deploy your database, it just becomes part of your pipeline. It is a command line enabled environment. So I have my SQL code next to my app code now. I don't have a server still. So what do I need now? I need a server. I want to be able to test as I develop my functions. And so I'm going to publish it to a new database emulator. This is going to become part of my code space. So within the code space, in that Docker runtime, I can stand up a SQL Server container or the new local emulator for Azure SQL Database, and it's going to create that container for me and publish the schema that I've been developing to it. So then I have my database ready for use in development. It's pretty exciting. And really in that kind of little wizard process that we have there for publish, you get that new environment ready for your app development. It's pulling the container image into my code space. I've got the container now. And so as it tries to connect, a couple things are going to be happening in the background. It's compiled that project, and then it's also going to try to connect to it from the extension. It looks like I've got a quick error that it tried to connect before it was ready. So let's grab the container logs real quick. We can do that with that Docker extension, view logs. So yeah, so the SQL engine here, we're seeing the inside of the container in our code space, and it's just getting that SQL engine started, and the DAC pack is deployed. That DAC pack are the schema objects. So all this has happened inside my code space. I haven't had to install anything on my machine. I have my customer table. It's empty. So it's ready for use. I mean, it's in my code space, and in the span of like 4 minutes, I'm ready to be developing. It's exciting. So if we throw a little bit of data in the table, we would be able to use this development instance. Like this is there for building out our Node.js API or the app that you're building. It's just kind of all in my browser, not on my machine.
Wow, this is so cool.
It's pretty exciting. And I already mentioned it, but I'm going to mention it again because it's so important. But being able to put those schema objects into source control, we're just going to commit them and then push out to my remote there. And then we'll be able to see that, hey, in my repository, I have the code for my database. So I'm able to deploy that now to production or test or staging or another developer environment, all from Codespaces. So thanks so much for letting me come tell people about Codespaces and being able to use all of this right from the browser or in VS Code, and just kind of getting started with working with your database.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much, Drew, for coming on the show. This is really cool.
It's so important to have that great base for trying out new things with SQL Server and Azure SQL Database. So it's good to be able to provide that.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Look forward to having you on the show again and showing us some cool stuff.
Thank you.
Awesome. So just as we continue forward, I wanted to wrap on some of the things that Drew mentioned to us. Like, this is really revolutionary for Azure SQL Database. It used to be there was no local development experience. You had to have an Azure account. You had to be in the Azure portal. So it's super cool that Drew has shared this with us. I also want to take a moment to remind everyone that everything will be posted, links to all this stuff at aka.ms/news updates. That's where you can find all the links to everything we're going to talk about and we've talked about today. And we're going to move right along, talk about a new Azure SQL Database capability. And for that, I'm going to bring on Davide. Davide, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, super happy to be here in person.
In person, yeah. We had a little, miscommunication. I thought you might be joining us from your house, but I'm glad you came in.
Yeah, I was used to do remote, and I said, really, in person? So, yeah, that's great to hear.
Yeah, no, it's definitely great to have you. I know we're going to be talking about REST endpoints, something I don't really know anything about, so let's take a look.
Yeah. Let me show you. So, basically we work on Azure SQL, everything is in Azure SQL. But wouldn't it be great if with Azure SQL you can call, for example, a REST endpoint that has been, a function, Azure function, for example, that has been created by a colleague or deployed in a container or in an app service or in a logic app. So just imagine you executing a storage procedure and executing an Azure function or calling and triggering a logic app. So that will be amazing because it can really create new amazing ways to integrate Azure SQL with other Azure resources and tools. But what if we move the bar a little bit higher and also say, why we can just connect also with cognitive services? Maybe I have some data and I want to analyze it right by calling cognitive services. Or I want to push data out from Azure SQL out to Event Grid or Event Hub to create this kind of reactive architectures that are really, really common today, they're really scalable. Or what if I have a service everywhere in the world, in any cloud, in any other cloud, or even on premises, and I want to connect to it?
Sure.
Well, I can use API management. And all within Azure SQL, just a simple storage procedure we have created. So I have an example here. So let's say I am using a REST client. I'm using Insomnia here to call a GraphQL service, right? To search for places where to have good Thai food here in Redmond. As you can see, I'm just using the regular GraphQL way to interact with data here. And I want to do exactly the same from Azure SQL. I want to be able to call exactly that endpoint from Azure SQL. And so here I'm connecting, I'm defining my endpoint, defining the authorization, and then using SP invoke external REST endpoint to call that GraphQL service. And as you can see here, I have the answer in JSON format, but luckily Azure SQL supports JSON pretty well, so I can open the JSON and treat it as a table, for example, if I wish, as you can see right now, or I can just have the JSON and then manipulate it as I prefer. And that's for just calling a service I've created. But what if I have a cognitive service instead that tries to detect an anomaly in my data? So I have an IoT solution that is pumping data into my Azure SQL, and I want to use cognitive services. Now, cognitive services requires data to be in a very specific format, like the one I'm showing. So an array of data, and you have to reach a specific URL that you get when you create the cognitive services. And when you call the cognitive services, it will tell you if the values you're supplying are expected or something looks like an anomaly, using a kind of a position-based rule. So you can basically have an array, and you will get an output array that tells you if an element in that position is an anomaly or not. So let's try to build a JSON from Azure SQL. I can do it pretty easily thanks to the JSON manipulation ability we have. This is the result of a query done on a table where I have data. And then all I need to do instead of printing out the JSON is sending it to my URL, right? And I'm providing exactly the same parameters I was providing when I was calling my URL from my REST endpoint. And basically here I'm just providing the payload. And the result is something I can even join back with my original table. So I'm getting data from my original table, sending it to cognitive services, getting the result, joining it back with my table, and look, here I have an anomaly. All within Azure SQL, just one storage procedure away. So this really will increase developer efficiency by a lot, because integration is just literally one line of code away. Now, what if I want to send some data to Event Hub so I can notify another service in a reactive scenario? Well, Event Hub exposes a REST endpoint, so I can just send some, for example, a message about some conferences I went, and I just sending it to the REST endpoint to my Event Hub. And here I'm using a tool that shows what is inside Event Hub. And as you can see, here I have my message. So from Azure SQL, I can push data out to Event Hub and enable integration with literally everything in Azure, right? Or even Event Grid if I prefer that service than Event Hub. So that's all with just one simple storage procedure that we are shipping in the product called SP invoke external REST endpoint. Will enable all this amazing integration with all the Azure services.
Wow, that was a lot. I mean, like, I think I'm gonna have to go back and process all the things that you showed, but like, it really feels like it's just opening the door for us to add more insights and information and integration. So how should people get started?
So right now we are putting this under like what we call an early adopter preview, because we just want to test this capability before releasing it to the public. So if you want to test it, there is a website and a link that you can go fill out a form, and we'll try to get you in the private preview as soon as possible. We had quite a lot of big success here, so the queue is pretty long, but we are trying to have everyone able to try this out. And then it's about all the creativity you can get. You can do whatever you want.
Awesome, cool. Well, hey, I understand why the queue is getting so long. This is pretty exciting stuff. But yeah, well, thanks so much, Davide, for coming on, telling us about these Azure SQL Database updates. Super exciting to see all the stuff coming out of you and Drew and the Azure SQL Database team. So hopefully we'll have something again to share next month.
Yeah, as soon as this is going public, we meet again.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Davide.
Thanks, Anna.
All right, okay, so we talked about SQL Server, we talked about Azure SQL Database, and I just wanted to spend a brief moment talking about Azure SQL Managed Instance, which is really like one of our big destinations when you move to the cloud for a migration. One update I just wanted to highlight is finally we have reached the general availability of the new Premium Series hardware. Now, this hardware is really important because it's going to get you a lot more memory, a lot more throughput, and customers are excited to see this finally land in general availability. And we've even done some studies or done some third-party studies with Principled Technologies showing how we outperform from a price performance standpoint Amazon RDS with this new hardware. So definitely go check that out. We'll put a link to it in the blog. That's Azure SQL Managed Instance. Next, we're going to move on to SQL Server on Azure Virtual Machine. And there's been a pretty exciting update in this space. And to talk about that, I'm going to bring on Mohamed. Mohamed, welcome to Data Exposed Live.
Thanks, Anna. Good to be here in person, finally.
It's great to have you in person. I don't think we've ever done an in-person recording.
No.
So it's great to have you on the show. I know you've covered a lot of different topics for us over the years on Data Exposed, but tell us about what's new in SQL Server and Azure VM.
Yeah, I have an exciting announcement. So SQL Server and Azure Virtual Machines, as we all know, is infrastructure as a service. And the best part of it is you can configure your storage, you can configure infrastructure the way you need it. And going with the theme of price performance on SQL Server and Azure Virtual Machines, we are excited to share that we now have a new disk offering, which is called Premium SSD V2.
Oh.
This is on top of premium SSDs that already existed that give you that high performance, but this just takes you to another level with the new capabilities that this disk offers. So starting off, this disk can support up to 64 terabytes of storage space. It gives you 4 times the IOPS from the predecessor, which is premium SSD. On a single disk, you can go up to 80,000 IOPS. And you get throughputs of 1200 Mbps. Now, this is getting really close to Ultra Disk, which is a super high performance disk, which are really good for super high intensive I/O workloads. But with premium SSD V2s, we believe that our customers are going to get the best price performance, primarily because of each single disk supporting such high IOPS and throughput. Now, on top of that, again with the theme of price performance, the first 3000 IOPS on every single disk on premium SSD V2 is free.
Free.
So if you're provisioning a disk with 5000 IOPS, your first 3000 is free and you only pay for the remaining 2000 IOPS. And the same goes for throughput. The first 125 Mbps throughput is free on every single disk on premium SSD V2s, and you pay for the deltas on top of that.
So if you use more than that, then
Correct.
you pay, but if you don't, it's
Correct.
just included.
Yes.
Awesome.
Again, this is well suited for sub-millisecond latency type workloads, very similar to Ultra Disk. But the best part of it all is you can control storage, IOPS, and throughput independently.
Oh.
So if you need a small database with small storage capacity, you can provision a smaller storage size and provision really high IOPS and really high throughput. So this gives you the flexibility to control your disk to suit your workloads.
Is this something that the V1, I guess?
No, V1 didn't have that. V1 was pretty rigid in the sense that you had to provision a P30 or a P40, and for every single disk there was a set storage capacity, there was a set IOPS, and there was set throughput. So there was no way to slide controls on each of these 3 elements. Now with premium SSD V2s you can, which is very similar to Ultra Disk, but at a lower cost.
Wow, okay, this is pretty
Right.
exciting.
Yes. Now, if you look at this chart here, this gives you a comparison of premium SSD V2s, and Ultra Disk. I know Pam and Aditya from my team have come on the show many times. They've spoken about the new series of VMs and Pam has this double sprinkles
Yes,
VMs, as she calls it, and she loves it. So I thought I'll match it up with sparkles. So sprinkles with sparkles go hand in hand. Now we believe that premium SSD V2s are going to be the best bet for running your SQL Server workloads at a price performant manner. Now again, I've gone through most of these. The best part of running premium SSD V2s again is that granular control across these elements of storage capacity, IOPS, and throughput. Again, if you look at the comparison between premium SSD and Ultra Disk, they're very similar in nature. They get the same granular control. It's suited for high I/O intensive workloads. Just that Ultra Disk gives you that extra bit of IOPS and throughput that you need.
Gotcha.
But not many SQL Server workloads need that level of IOPS and throughput that Ultra Disk provides. So we feel that our customers are better off just running premium SSD V2s for most of their production workloads.
Got it. Okay, and then let me take a step back because again, I still sometimes get confused with some of the options. So Pam, like you mentioned, has talked about the EBDS V2.
V5.
Is that right? V5.
Yes.
Oh, we're on V5 now.
Yes.
V5. Okay, so we're on the V5. Now we
Yeah.
have the premium SSD V2. How do these things go together?
So again, the EBDS V5 is a VM series, right? So that's your compute infrastructure. You can attach any disk to it that you want. You could attach a premium SSD, a premium SSD V2, or an Ultra Disk, right? So again, IaaS being IaaS and SQL Server is an IaaS offering, you can control what compute you want and what disk storage configuration that you want. So premium SSD V2s with EBDS V5 give you the best price performance for your compute and your storage.
Okay, so
together.
now that's how you get the double sprinkles and the sparkles. We didn't want to go triple sprinkles would just.
Not yet.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so one question I've had, I know there was some benchmarking done in the past. Have you done any benchmarking with this new series?
That's a good question. So earlier this year, GigaOM, one of the analyst firms, did a benchmarking study to prove that SQL Server runs best on Azure VMs, and they did a price performance comparison with AWS. What you'll see here is that blue chart is what GigaOM came up with. They said price per query for every analytical workload in SQL Server is that. Now what we did was this premium SSD V2 were just launched a couple of weeks ago. So we don't have the capacity yet to complete all our testing and performance analysis. But we thought, what if we were to take those metrics and swap out the disks from premium SSD to premium SSD V2s, what would the numbers look like? So by just doing a financial comparison, we can tell you that premium SSD V2s are far cheaper compared to premium SSDs. So this just takes that benchmark one step further in reducing your price that you pay for your disk. Again, this is just hypothetical financial calculations.
Sure.
We're going through performance testing, and once we have more updates, we'll probably share more updates in our documentation and blog. But we believe that premium SSD V2s, because of the granular controls that you get between storage IOPS and throughput, can give you the best bang for your buck.
Okay, got it. And then finally, just to wrap, how do people, is this public preview? I can't remember what you had said.
So again, this is very new. It's
Okay.
only been out for 2 weeks now.
Okay.
It's currently available in East US and West Europe.
Okay.
You can sign up for preview. It's an allow listed preview. So the links that we've shared in the blog will have links for you to sign up and get started with premium SSD V2s. And we highly encourage our SQL Server customers to try it out.
Yeah, it feels like
give
why
us
wouldn't
feedback.
you? Yeah.
And we'll be happy to work with you if you need.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Mohamed.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks
Awesome.
For,
Great
thanks
to
for
have you
having
on the
us.
show.
Yeah.
All right, so that's exciting. You heard it here first. Just announced a couple weeks ago, available in East US and West Europe, and it sounds like you can sign up for a preview to get a little bit more maybe in your area, or stay tuned to see what comes next. But really exciting stuff, always exciting to see what we're doing. Before we go into our last segment, we are going to talk a little bit about some other database updates. So as you all know, starting at the beginning of this year, I started trying to throw in some stuff from Postgres and MySQL and Flexible Server for open source databases. So basically, there's a lot of things that have landed in the past month in this space, especially for PostgreSQL Hyperscale Citus, which is basically an extension to Postgres that we support now in Azure Database for Postgres, and allows you to run kind of distributed Postgres at scale. A lot of stuff happening in this space, good place to watch. And then Flexible Server, with Flexible Server for Azure Database for MySQL and Azure Database for Postgres, we've been enhancing a lot, kind of bringing that feature parity, and that's why you're seeing a lot of the things that you see here today. Now we're seeing a lot of customers see the benefits of Flexible Server over single server. So again, all these links will be in the blog at aka.ms/news updates, so you'll definitely want to check that out. And now I want to bring on Daniel to talk to us about something called Microsoft Purview. So Daniel, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And it was great to see Purview covered a bit in the earlier demos as well. So it's great to kind of be involved with Data Exposed and be here in person again.
Yeah, it's exciting to have you on the show in person. I think we've done some stuff online, but not in person. And Microsoft Purview, even though it's not a database, right, which is typically what we cover, this is a very integral part, as Bob showed earlier, and governance is becoming only more and more important. So would love to get your take on what's new and what's going on.
Absolutely. And today I'm here to kind of show just a few of the new and exciting updates that we have to our data map and our data catalog. So for those that are a bit newer to Purview, it is Microsoft's unified data governance solution. And we're built upon a data map that automates and takes in data from all across your data state, obviously including SQL Server. And then we have a bunch of different applications built upon that, for different ways to govern your data. One of which is the data catalog, which is really focused at your data analysts, your data engineers, folks that are trying to come and accomplish a data-driven task and trying to find something that they can use for that. Say you're building a BI report and you need to find the source table. Bob showed a little bit about some of the kind of integrations with Synapse, but I want to focus on a bit on the new capabilities that we have in terms of adding additional metadata, adding additional curation. So just recently, we released a feature called Managed Attributes, which is now in public preview. And this allows you to enrich any asset with organizational metadata that's specific to your business. So with Purview, when we bring in metadata from, say, SQL Server, we have everything that's on the table and everything that's in that server. But oftentimes, you don't have the context of, OK, who's the owning team, if it's part of a cost center. Now with Managed Attributes, you can append that information, organize it in a way so when someone comes to this SQL Server, when someone comes to the SQL database, to that schema, they can see who is the proper owner, who is, like, what does it mean to them, and how can they then use that. Now this is managed as part of our data map annotation management and can be applied to really any sort of type. And we call it Managed Attributes because you control what are the data types, what are the options of, like, what are the values that you can apply to these keys, and also which types do they apply to, and whether it be a SQL table, whether it be to something that you create via the APIs themselves. It can apply to all of that, but you're able to control that.
Okay, cool. And so just so I have some context, because again, like Purview is still a little new to me, like how does this relate to, I'm just relating back to what Bob showed us, where you had the different owners and the different metadata there.
Yeah.
Where would this kind of show up?
Absolutely. So the owners and like the experts and all of the people are still just as important in terms of how they relate to a table. It's just different sorts of information. So the classifications, for example, those tell you what it is. You scan a SQL table and you see a column and you're like, oh, that's a social security number. Then because of that, that has different governance implications.
Right. Oh, for sure.
When it comes to the context and your data owners, like, though that's who's responsible for the data, and then also who you can ask about the data. If I'm coming in here and I see, okay, this product table, it looks like something I can use, but I need more information.
Right.
Well, you need to be able to ask the person that knows what that answer is. And these managed attributes are ways to just add additional metadata, ways that, okay, if you have a piece of metadata that really just means something specific to your organization, this allows you to do that.
Okay, got it. Cool.
Versus
Very cool.
something like an asset description, really everyone, that's just consistent throughout everyone. In addition, we also are adding ways to edit the, I guess, aforementioned asset description, and we just launched our rich text editor in general availability. Now this just lets you go from just editing using plain text to being able to add bolding, italics, tables. You can just copy and paste hyperlinks. And these are available in any data assets, any glossary terms. And this really just gives you more information, more enrichment, more ways to organize and curate these data assets. So when someone comes to find them, they know exactly what it means. They know how to use it. They know who to ask. They know really anything that they would want to know about that data.
Yeah, no, I think makes a ton of sense. It also feels like, it's going to be a lot easier to consume than if you just had like, oh, here's like this long string of text. You can put a link in that you can't click. Like,
exactly.
This is awesome. Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of this is integrated with those search experiences. So, if you search, say I was to search the data governance platform, now I would get those assets that are tagged with this managed attribute as well, and with the rich text, like these are all available again via API, via the user experience. So any way that you're interacting with that asset, interacting with the data map, you'll be able to see this information.
Okay, cool, awesome. And then another question I had is, it says generally available. So what should folks do? Let's say they're new to Microsoft Purview overall. Like how should they get started and probably build up to using this and the other capabilities?
Definitely, definitely. So Microsoft Purview as a service is generally available. You just go to the Azure portal and you just click create and you spin up a Purview instance. Now with these features, both anything in public preview and generally availability, that just means it's there. You have Purview. First thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set up a scan or have some way to actually get that data in. But once that data is in, it comes with a bunch of curation that comes in flight. Again, those classifications. We have scanners. When you're scanning SQL Server, you're able to just, I can see that this data came in and our system knows that it is personally identifiable information. We're able to detect that using our AI and ML capabilities. And once that's in there, then you need the proper permissions. But if you're a data curator in the area in which we call collections within Purview, that an asset's in, you can come in and then enrich that. So everyone else that's coming in to search them, they can look at them and understand what's going on. But everything that I've shown you today, it's there just by turning on Purview.
Okay, cool, awesome. So for folks who are already using Purview, they can take advantage of this. And for folks who are thinking about using Purview, maybe this will be the trigger that gets them started.
Exactly, a way to just go ahead and try it out.
Awesome, well, anything else that folks should know?
No, I mean, we're constantly innovating, constantly releasing new features, so just stay tuned for more updates of just better ways to discover and govern your information.
Awesome, great. Well, thanks so much, Daniel, for coming on the show. Governance is such a big piece of having a good data estate, so I anticipate and hope that we'll have you and other members of your team on the show sometime soon as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome, thank you. Great, so that was Daniel from the Microsoft Purview team. Super exciting to see all those updates. Again, just want to remind you, you've seen a lot of different speakers talking about a lot of different things. If you head over to the blog, which is live now, you'll be able to see all those updates and references to all those updates, and even things that we're going to talk a little bit more about just now. So as you all know, or if you've watched Data Exposed live news updates before, I typically spend a good amount of time. I read all the blogs, tell you all the scoop on everything you need to know. Because of the exciting format that we did today, I'm not going to go through all of those, but I will say we released a ton of exciting Data Exposed episodes. We released a ton of exciting blogs that go into details of a lot of the announcements you've seen today, as well as some other announcements as well. So you're definitely not going to want to miss this blog URL. And just a reminder, every month we update this URL to point to the latest news update blogs, so you can use it to always stay up to date. I've even heard that Bob Ward himself watches or reads these blogs to figure out what's new in Azure SQL, SQL Server, and the databases space in general. So definitely follow along with that. A couple things I wanted to cover. Unfortunately, Marisa is not here. She is my co-producer and a great supporter of Data Exposed, and especially our events. So I wanted to take a moment and just cover some of the upcoming events so that you all can prepare for them. It might be a little bit late to travel to Microsoft HQ and make it to Visual Studio Live, which is happening right now. But a couple other events that you might be interested in. In September, we have Data Platform Summit, which is happening virtually. So you can pretty much join that from wherever you are in the world. That'll be really exciting. We're actually, I think, going to do a Data Exposed live news updates from Data Platform Summit. That'll be our next one next month. We also have Data Saturday Dallas coming up in September, as well as Data Saturday Atlanta coming up in October. So again, this is like the SQL Saturday community event. It's free to attend, so if you live in or near Dallas or Atlanta, I highly recommend you go ahead and register for this. I know I'll be speaking at some of these events, as well as some of the people you saw today, so definitely something to tune into. Also, if you missed any of our Data Exposed episodes, you want to check them out, you can go to that final link there, Data Exposed YT. Again, we'll post all this in the blog so you can see it. And as always, I always do a Learn module of the month. I'm kind of jumping the gun here because I am doing the Anna's Pick of the Month and Learn Module of the Month out of order. But for the Learn Module of the Month, it's been a long time since we talked about an introduction to Azure SQL. Maybe you'll see from my Pick of the Month why I highlighted this one specifically, but I wanted to bring back up the introduction to Azure SQL module on Microsoft Learn. This is something that Bob and myself created, and we've been trying our best to keep updated over the past couple years. It's gotten a lot of popularity, which is pretty exciting. We weren't sure if that was going to happen. There's a whole learning path associated with it, so you can also go and take this and then go on to, for example, pass a certification like DP300. We've heard a lot of folks that have done this, and we have a whole video series that is attached to it as well. Finally, my pick of the month. This is kind of a random one, but I started this thing on TikTok. I guess you could call it Walking with Moose. Moose is my dog, which sometimes makes an appearance in various streams, but obviously not today in the studio. But this is essentially short form videos where I'm going to take you through Azure SQL, SQL Server, running databases in general, and running databases on Azure, or anywhere else. So if you want to follow along, see videos of my dog, see videos of me walking my dog and talking about tech, this is just a couple clips from the first couple episodes. If you're not on TikTok, that's totally cool too. We're also posting them on Instagram Reels and Twitter, so kind of wherever hopefully that fits one of your social media things. Super new to me, so follow along, give us feedback, let us know, or I guess let me know what you think. So that's my shameless plug for Reels. Lastly, I just want to thank you all for tuning in. I know it's been a wild ride of a year, and we're excited to be able to have you here in person. Remember, we do this just about the first Wednesday of every month at 9 a.m. Pacific. Again, that can change. The best way to stay up to date is to follow us on Twitter at Azure SQL. Again, just want to thank you all for tuning in. If you like this episode, go ahead, give it a like, subscribe to our channel, follow us on Twitter, subscribe. Do you subscribe to a TikTok? Follow on TikTok, follow on Instagram, and we hope to see you next time on Data Exposed.